November has always been a good month for Sesame Street. The show premiered on November 10th, 1969, and thus for years, new seasons began every November. But also, since 1974, the Sesame cast has appeared in basically every Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Personally, this has always been exciting to me. Even as a grown-up, or whatever passes for a grown-up for a 34-year-old with a Sesame Street podcast, the Sesame Float is a highlight for me every year. Every year, my parents yell, "Becca, the Muppets are on!" And I have to run to the TV to catch 30 seconds of Stronger, Smarter, Kinder, or whatever they're singing this year. Wait a second, that's not right. What's the name of that song? I'll come back to it. Let's just keep going. Anyway, I like checking in on the parade for similar reasons why I like reading about old ragdoll lines or thinking about branded socks. Like we said in earlier discussions of merchandise, events like the Macy's Day Parade require the Sesame brand to condense its massive cast down to a core group, giving a good sense of who was viewed as important. So, 1974 is the first year the Sesame crew rode in the parade. And you can guess who was the core group then. Bert, Ernie, Big Bird, Oscar, Mr. Hooper. In 1975, there was no float. And then, in 1976, there was a slight change to the lineup. Joining our main puppet gang was a new character who debuted on Sesame Street 2 years earlier. Riding alongside Ernie and Bert was your friend and mine, Rodeo Rosie.
What's the name of that song?
Oh, that's the name of the song. You know, by the time Rodeo Rosie appeared in the Thanksgiving parade, her time on Sesame Street was ending. Before the parade, she appeared on the show only 5 times in 2 years. After the parade, in one sketch that would be re-aired 3 more times before it was abandoned. 9 times total. Then she shows up in the 1977 parade, and then never again. To me, decades later, her parade appearances seem bizarre, simultaneously championing her as a main character, while also serving as her swan song. Prairie Dawn didn't appear in a Thanksgiving parade until 1994. But Rosie? Rosie was here, with a featured role on national television. Twice. What's interesting, though, is as a kid born in 1991, I knew Rodeo Rosie. Her appearances weren't being aired, but I knew Rosie. I didn't like Rosie, but I knew her. On this show, I feel like I'm always asking if characters were meant to be main characters. But honestly, for Rodeo Rosie, that question is more interesting than usual. And that's why I think I need to spend a whole episode talking about her. So folks, as the saying goes, save a horse, podcast about a cowgirl. Or something. We're having a down-home hootenanny as we try to figure out, is Rodeo Rosie good? Mothers, don't let your babies become cowgirls, and you'll find out why right here on a Prairie Dawn Companion.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Starlight Hotel takes great pride in presenting the world's favorite 6-year-old entertainer, Miss Prairie Dawn. Come on, girls, girls, girls. Let's go do girl stuff. Yeah, girl stuff.
Can you play a song with a beat?
So here's the thing about Rodeo Rosie. I said earlier that I knew her in 1991, despite not seeing any clips with her until I was a grown adult with YouTube access. And that's because of trans media. You remember transmedia, the term we discussed in our second episode, the one on Betty Lou? Basically, it refers to the idea that certain media properties span multiple formats. And in the case of Sesame Street, we know that means albums and books and toys and dolls and puppets and Big Bird's walking letters, or, stuff like that. Rosie may have only ever appeared in 6 total sketches, but she appeared fairly consistently in books. Never albums, rarely merchandise, but in 49 different books that spanned the years between 1977 and 1992. But why? She literally stopped appearing in new material before her first book appearance. I think, other than Grover's mommy, who we'll discuss one day, Rodeo Rosie has the worst ratio between show appearances and book appearances, appearing in over 8 times as many books as episodes with new Rosie content. Why her? By 1974, hadn't Hollywood stopped caring about cowboys? Did kids like cowboys? Well, to answer that question, I figured that I need to bring in the big guns. Or I guess, the big lasso. This week, I'm talking to a real-life cowgirl. And by that I mean, a friend of mine from the southern United States. My guest today is Rachel Garrett Steele, an amazing writer and composer who you might know for writing music for Fallout 4 Nuka World. Let's join her in the guest corner so we can try to rustle up some Rodeo Rosie insight.
It's showtime, people! Oh, welcome to our little play.
So, like I said, my guest today is a dear friend of mine. I'm so happy to have, for her first time on a ToughPigs podcast, my friend Rachel Garrett Steele. Rachel, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, Rachel, it is a pleasure. What's the point of having your own podcast about female Muppets if you don't use that as an excuse to get your friends on your podcast about female Muppets?
I mean, I think especially when your friends kind of are female Muppets.
Yeah,
it's critical.
I mean, Rachel, you're qualified for so many reasons because you're just a wonderful person who is so knowledgeable about so many things. But, the reason I reached out to you in particular is because you are a friend of mine who is from the South.
I am. I am from the southern United States.
It is true.
I am from Arkansas.
And I wasn't sure if Arkansas was cowboy town or not. But I felt like if anyone could tell me a little bit about what it's like to care about cowboys, I figured it would be someone from the South. But also I just have a genuine, and we were texting a little bit about this. I have a genuine question, which is just like, is Rodeo Rosie good? Do we like Rodeo Rosie? And I feel like there's 2 layers to this question, which is, first of all, like, do we like cowboys? And then do we like Rodeo Rosie? And I was like, there's no one I want to explore that with more than my dear friend Rachel.
Yeah, I mean, those are both actually, I think, really big questions. And I don't even know where to start talking about this. I mean, do you want to talk first about like Rodeo Rosie's whole deal because there's just so little of it, or do you just kind of...
Sure. Well, let's talk a little bit. I'll have mentioned some of this already. I haven't recorded my little cold open, but I'll mention some of this later. Rodeo Rosie is a really strange Muppet for several reasons. Not only because, not exclusively, but definitely because She's one of the final humanoid Muppets to have a full set of teeth.
And they're really distressing.
I don't like them.
They're horrifying, honestly. There's a lot about the character that's distracting. And the teeth still manage to make, like, the top 5, right? Like, it's...
Yeah, 100%. I think I got used to them by the end of doing my research. I think I got teeth Stockholm syndrome.
Well, great for you. I'm still actively horrified by the teeth.
Folks at home and most people listening to this podcast, or many people listening to this podcast, because I know we've got a bunch of, big Muppet fans listening. This morning, I had the pleasure of introducing Rachel to the concept of Bert's nephew Brad's teeth. So that was a great thing for Rachel to be eating breakfast during.
I actually didn't have much of an appetite after dealing with Brad's teeth.
But more importantly, Rodeo Rosie. Let's get back to Rodeo Rosie. Rodeo Rosie's a purple anything Muppet. It's the same anything Muppet base that would be built into, or was already built into, the Count and the Amazing Mumford.
The Count's, like, sexy cousin.
Yes, exactly. And Granny Fanny Nesselrode, who we discussed on the 4th episode of this show. It's all the same anything Muppet base. Rodeo Rosie's a cowgirl. She's got red braided hair and a white or light tan cowboy hat and a bright pink cowboy jacket with a Muppet cow emblazoned on the back of it. And Rodeo Rosie has hideous teeth and is performed by Jerry Nelson. So once again, like with Betty Lou, we have an example of a female character being performed by a male puppeteer. It's Jerry Nelson doing a falsetto, and I gotta be honest with you, a pretty annoying falsetto.
Boy, you gotta get up early in the morning to fool old Rosie, and even then you can't.
Yeah, it's not his best, honestly. Now, I will say that I did sort of deeply relate to a Southern woman with a masculine voice. That was...
Yeah, I like to think of you as the real Rodeo Rosie because you can absolutely relate to that.
I can. Well, I mean, what I tell people is I was a young cowboy and didn't much like where that was headed, so I changed directions, and now you might say I'm kind of a reverse cowgirl.
Thank you. I expected you to make that joke on this show because I know that you love making that joke.
I do. I'm sorry.
No.
Not a lot of people know me well enough to have heard it more than once, but,
So, the thing about Rodeo Rosie that's so mystifying to me is it feels like Rodeo Rosie was supposed to be a main character. And I have no notes on this. I don't have notes from Sesame Workshop on this. Rodeo Rosie appears for the first time in the premiere of season 6, which was November 4th, 1974. It's the season premiere. Weirdly enough, it's episode 666, maybe foretelling Rosie's doom. Rodeo Rosie appears for the first time there, and oftentimes Sesame Street obviously isn't the kind of show like Lost where it's like you gotta watch every episode to understand what's going on. I know that this is a show for babies. I want to make that very clear. But oftentimes in the first episode of a season, they would introduce new characters or sort of reestablish what the status quo would be. And not only does Rosie first appear in this episode, Rosie introduces herself to the neighborhood in this episode.
Well, I got to say I'm right pleased to meet up with all of you. Wahoo! Wahoo! And I got to say it's even nice to be here on your tiny, puny little street.
So it truly seems like Rosie is like, I'm Rosie, I'm here to stay. Except Rosie then doesn't show up again in the entirety of season 6 of Sesame Street. Doesn't appear again for another year until season 7. Appears 4 times in season 7, ending with an appearance in the 1976 Thanksgiving parade. Her vocals are audible. It is clear the camera focuses on Rodeo Rosie at some point. And then after that Thanksgiving parade, she will appear in one more segment and then never again on Sesame Street. So simultaneously, she feels like a main character who they wanted to care about, who interacts with Big Bird, with all the adults, with Grover, who gets a big introduction, who introduces this character of Lance as well, her horse, who we'll talk a little bit about, but not that much because he's a boy. And then just vanishes. And I can't really say why she vanishes. I wish there was a reason that I could cite, like with, Roosevelt Franklin's classmates last week that we talked about, sort of leaving the show due to controversy. Rodeo Rosie is both so many things and so few things all at once, and I find that so fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, it kind of feels like maybe the reason that she's so sporadic and the reason that she disappears is that they aren't quite sure what they want to do with her. I mean, like, obviously she's broad in the way that a lot of Sesame Street characters and a lot of Muppet characters are broad. She's got her big obvious hook. She's got her lasso, and, she's down from, some unspecified land in the South where everything's bigger.
So presumably Texas. It's presumably a Texas
Yeah,
joke.
I mean, yeah. And I would say given her... Yeah. But, like, what does that mean? What does that look like? Because when she first shows up, it's actually kind of this poignant thing, and I had a little bit of a hard time with it. Because, like, I was a very, like, not narrow, but, like, I was a very focused child. And, like, truth and, like, facts and, like, objective, like, knowable reality was all very important to me. And, you would have those kids on the playground who would just, like, make me up. It's the, like, oh, well, if you climbed the top of the Mario 64 tower, like, 100 times, and you backflipped this, like, one specific pixel, and then Luigi will be there. And then, like, they would just, like, leave, and you would go, like, wreak havoc trying to do this thing that they had just, like, completely made up, right? Because kids want to impress each other. It angered me. Like, I had, like, a really sort of, like, tightly wound sense of justice, and I still do.
And it feels like in this scene that is sort of the lesson they're going for with Rodeo Rosie. Because she's telling tall tales is what's going on.
Look, see where I come from?
Yeah.
Everything is the biggest. We got the biggest everything. Biggest trees, biggest stores. Yes, indeed. I mean, everything is bigger.
Biggest everything, huh?
That's right. Even our animals are the biggest. We got ants this big. Yeehaw!
Wait a second. Hold it now.
She's saying that everything was bigger where she came from, and the adults are like, Rosie, you don't have to make stuff up for us to like you.
No, like, it was intense, right? Like, she's talking about these like, the trees were bigger, the clouds are bigger, the ants are, like, up to your ankle. It was kind of horrific, really.
And, the punchline to this is, of course, Big Bird enters, and she goes,
Big Bird? You call that big? Why, back where I come from, we got birds twice your size. We got...
And that's supposed to be funny, because obviously Big Bird is the biggest bird. But it's in his name. That is not brought up again. If that was the lesson that they wanted to teach with Rosie doesn't tell tall tales ever again on the show.
No. I mean, and it's honestly probably for the best that she not be so completely one note, right? I mean...
You say that, but then she becomes even more one note.
Well, yes. She gets a second note, and then they press it a lot. But I mean, okay, so, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is if they did want her to have sort of, like, longevity, right? then like she does need a personality. Like Cookie Monster kind of gets away with it, but like Big Bird and Snuffleupagus and, you know, Kermit, they have personalities.
I feel like there's two kinds of Muppets. And we talk a lot about like order Muppets and chaos Muppets as a distinction.
Yes.
That's something you'll hear all the time. But I feel like there's main character Muppets and comic relief Muppets. And like Cookie Monster doesn't need to have a well-rounded personality because his role is just to be funny and to be a punchline, right? And the Count is just funny and a punchline, or maybe has some catchy songs. But like Big Bird has a nuanced personality and like deals with issues, and kids get to watch him, you know, learning about grief and stuff. And you know, and Elmo is like that today. And like you said, Snuffy had some moments of that as well. Whereas again, like you're not, and there's some characters who can kind of walk the line in between those two things. Rosie feels like maybe she was just intended to just be a comic relief character like Cookie Monster, but she's also not funny. Whereas Cookie Monster,
no, like,
Cookie
not even a
Monster
little
is
bit.
funny. Like we can agree that Cookie Monster is funny.
Yes. No, I mean, I'm the last person to claim that I'm not a monster, Becca. At least not the kind who would go around making claims of that nature.
Telling tall tales about how where you live now, monsters eat twice as much cookies.
You call that a funny monster? That's not a funny monster.
Wow, you are good at that.
Thank you. But no, yeah, then it sort of takes a turn, because then the next bit, and you see it, like 3 or 4 times, is that she becomes kind of hypervigilant about like cattle rustlers and grocery thieves, and just sort of spends all of her time hog-tying the adults with her lariat for fear that they are either robbing Mr. Hooper's store or stealing her horse.
Wahoo! Wait a minute. Gotcha!
Rosie!
Yeah, trying to break into this store too, huh? Oh, it's a good thing I stuck around and kept my eye on this critter.
Rosie, wait a minute. You didn't even give me a chance to take the tool out of the toolbox.
What, do you think I'm gonna let you get a head start? Don't be silly. We got a nip crime in the bud.
Yeah, there's definitely in what is her second to last appearance, which I labeled as Rodeo Rosie Stops the Runner, which was from season 7, episode 845, which aired February 6th, 1976. Rosie seems to suggest that her job is protecting Hooper's store. And you get the sense that she decided that was her job, not Mr. Hooper. But literally, second appearance in December 4th, 1975, she thinks Oscar is robbing an imaginary stagecoach and lassos Oscar. Thinks everyone is stealing her horse Lance, so throws the lariat around Bob's neck like 4 times in her third appearance. In her fourth appearance, she thinks both Mr. Hooper and Luis are breaking into stores and throws the lariat around Mr. Hooper and Luis's neck. And then in Rodeo Rosie Stops the Runner, she gets Big Bird and she gets Mr. Hooper.
Right, and like...
And maybe also somebody else. I'm forgetting. It doesn't matter. The point is, that's her thing, is she's hyper-vigilant about people doing crimes and throws her lasso around their necks and tightens it around their necks, which is weird to see.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's actually kind of upsetting imagery in 2025, right? Like, and especially if the character is, supposed to be this, like, Southern gal who's, like, hypervigilant having moved to the big city, like, that in itself is kind of ugly. And then also, like, it becomes this thing where, like, the very careful, very practiced, like, deliberate, pointed diversity of the Sesame Street cast kind of makes her bit, like, genuinely ugly for her to just sort of like go around accusing these people of crimes and like, you know, throwing a rope around their neck. Like it's not a great look.
Yeah, it's not great imagery to see Rodeo Rosie, you know, throw a rope around the neck of like Susan, a black woman. Like, it especially feels like there's some sort of context there that I don't love.
Yeah, no, I mean, and, you know, I can talk about it being ugly in 2025, but also, like, we are fresh off of the civil rights movement, you know, like...
So I always say this, just to put this in perspective, 1969 is the year Sesame Street premieres. Rodeo Rosie makes her first appearance in 1974. 1968 is the year Martin Luther King is assassinated.
Gosh.
1969, when Sesame Street debuts, and we talked about this on an earlier episode, it's banned in Mississippi. They refuse to air it in Mississippi because it shows an interracial neighborhood. So we are really not that far removed from the civil rights movement. The original Gordon was a major, like, civil rights activist before and during his time on the show.
I mean, and, you know, it's... all of those things are still very present for those with eyes to see them, right? I mean, I used to work out of a company in Memphis, right? I was living in Austin at the time.
How big were things there?
It is true that everything's bigger in Texas. I mean, it just is, you know, I'm sorry.
Okay, we'll continue. I shouldn't interrupt this. This was a serious conversation.
No, it's fine. You know, it's
we're talking
wide
about
open...
race relations.
We are, but you know, sometimes you've also got to talk about wide open spaces and room to make a big mistake. But no, it actually... We were talking about this because you were talking about, you know, are cowboys still a thing where you're from, right? And the truth is, there are a lot of ways in which the past is never far behind you in the South, you know? And I think part of that is a deep sense of, like, traditionalism that is an incredibly double-edged sword. I don't know. I mean... So yeah, my job used to fly me out from Austin to Memphis every few months, just, I guess, to make sure I still existed. And, you know, we would, of course, go and, like, see what Memphis had to offer and, you know, try the restaurants and see the sights and do all this thing. And one night I went out with some of my coworkers and, you know, we were on Beale Street and... Beale Street is just sort of like a perennially cordoned off, right? And people sort of, the permission and I guess the expectation is that you will get, you know, a drink, a cocktail, or like a, you know, an alcoholic slushie from somewhere, and then just sort of wander the street in this crowd of people, and everyone's just sort of like partying and jovial, right? And so that was the environment that we participated in. And then as we were trying to, you know, like hail a cab, we thought it would be wise to walk a few blocks away from the hubbub, right? And then all of a sudden, we were right outside the hotel where Dr. King was shot. I mean, I was looking right at it, just a couple blocks away, and that'll sober you up real quick, you know. It's a hell of a thing. I had a friend who was married in Galveston, and like at the facility where he was married, like it was the building where like Juneteenth happened, right? Like we stood on that balcony, and I don't know if you're like familiar with Juneteenth, but basically,
well, why don't you tell our audience?
Sure. So,
not everybody's as smart as me, Rachel.
I know, and what a cross to bear for you, Becca.
I know, it's so hard.
sort of when slavery was like nominally abolished, right, with some sort of glaring and critical exceptions, but like when slavery was abolished, basically like it took time for the word to spread, and it took extra time for the word to spread because the people in power and the slaveholders and all of these people were like not spreading the word, right? Because it was in their interest not to. So, the law has changed and human beings are still enslaved, because humanity is horrific. And, as basically, ultimately, the government sends envoys into the South to like announce that this is no longer okay. And Juneteenth like celebrates the day that I guess like the last courier stood on this like balcony in Galveston, Texas, the far end, right? Like Gulf of Mexico's right there. And, functionally, theoretically, like communicates to the last possible community, like, hey, we're done with this, to the extent that we ever actually were. So, like there are these places. There were Civil War battlegrounds near the town I went to middle school, and you would go on these school field trips, and they would talk about how to load a musket, and they would make everything just like as kid friendly as they could, but like it's all still right there, right? And then you like see this history, and you have to reconcile it with the fact that the truck in front of your mom's car at the school pickup lane picking up her kids like has a Confederate flag on the back, when like you've seen all the things that means. And so you're just sort of perennially conscious of it if you're the kind of person who gives a damn, right? And so like in that context, I mean, I went to high school in Texarkana, and there was a movie, I think it was actually like I think it was a slasher movie, actually, kind of like unrelated to the racial issues. But the name of the movie is The Town That Dreaded Sundown.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I mean, that's a nod to a very specific, like, extra legal form of like status quo enforcement, and so like as like that is part of my birthright, right? Like just that legacy of blood is part of what I was born into. This is getting real heavy for a Muppet podcast.
Yeah, I was, it's lasso is a word that starts with the letter L. No, but Rachel, this is why I wanted you on. Because, what's interesting here is like, yeah, the thing about cowboys that becomes difficult is, we all love the aesthetic of cowboys, right? And, we're going to keep on dancing at the Pink Pony Club and all these different things. And was I listening to Kesha's Yippee-Ki-Yay on loop to get ready for this? Absolutely. But it's one of those things that it's very difficult to talk about cowboys without grappling with the reality of this situation and this world. Because this world, I mean, this part of American history shapes what American history looks, what modern America looks like today.
Yeah.
And we're not, again, it's not something that's fake and fictional. And you were even telling me things that I didn't realize with like how the word cowboy, is diminutive because it was something that was used as an insult to black cow herders.
I mean, yeah, so like most cowhands were like black or Latine, cowboy was sort of specifically, at least what I have like been told, what I have read, what I have learned, like was specifically sort of like this diminutive, like insulting thing compared to being like a cow hand, right? Or like a ranch hand. And yeah, I mean, it's really interesting too, because there is the reality of that era, which like, it's a fascinating era, right? Like, and a lot of the history of that era comes through my state, my hometown, and towns that I have grown up in, and places that I have loved. It's a fascinating time to be queer, right? Because if you are living life, sort of pretending to be a woman in a wealthy, like, Massachusetts family, and you know that's not who you are, you can just, like, pack a suitcase and hop on a train out west, and you can go be the man that you know you're supposed to be, and no one will question you until your autopsy, right? As long as you are good at whatever it is you say you're doing, and people stay out of your hair. Like, there are fascinating cases of like queer people and trans people leading full, rich lives, getting married, right? Because they were taking advantage of the relative lawlessness of this era. And the fact that information does not travel like it does now. So like there are interesting things. There's a lot of cool stuff happening.
But it feels like it all gets condensed in a weird way, right? Where the cowboy and the Wild West isn't about queerness. I mean, it is and it isn't. We've all seen Brokeback Mountain. It is and it isn't.
I actually haven't.
Oh, you know, I haven't either. I was hoping that you wouldn't call me out on that. We'll do a movie night at one point. But I've already promised that I'm going to force you to do an Emmett Otter movie night at one point. But like, it isn't necessarily about that, and it isn't about the diversity of the cowboy experience. Cowboy sort of becomes this catch-all for a sort of, again, like, white lawman, you know, with a 10-gallon hat and a lasso and a star and boots and all of that.
And all the stuff that Rodeo Rosie has, right?
Right. Because Rodeo Rosie isn't about what it's like. You know, you brought up such an interesting thing, too, in a discussion we were having over text, where it's like, Rodeo Rosie could be a character, and I'd love for you to expand on this. Rodeo Rosie could be a character who deals with the idea of like moving from a small town to a big city and trying to fit in and trying to learn that life is different here and there's more different kinds of people and we act differently and there's different, you know, be careful when you cross the street and all of these different lessons from the big to the small that you have to learn.
Yeah, see, we didn't have to worry about that, Colin, because we don't have sidewalks at all. So you just... but yeah, no, like, it was interesting. I mean, like, when my wife and I graduated college, right? Like, we graduated college, we got married, and we moved to Boston for her to go to grad school. And, like, there were a lot of kinds of culture shock, right? Like, and one of them actually is that the racism was in some ways worse in Boston, or at least more overt, right? Because what I had grown up with was, like, horrible, but it was subtle in its way, and it was, like, very deeply ingrained. And I think I watched more white dudes just straight up throw slurs in 2 years in Boston than, like, the previous 20 in my various, like, suburbs and small towns and occasionally cities in Arkansas. So, like, you know, that piece was different. Yeah, no, like, the noise, the landscape, the air smells different. I had sort of spent my entire childhood actually being really ashamed of my accent. Because it's not in media like an accent for smart people, right? And I I spent a lot of time sort of, with like my mom's like movies that she taped off of Turner Classic, like practicing the transatlantic accent, and doing the sort of, Jimmy Stewart thing. And,
voice training years before you realized anything.
I'm sure I don't know what you mean, darling. But, like... And, that's the interesting thing, too, now, actually, when I did go to voice training. Like, I have come around on that so quickly. The woman I did my first voice lesson with was from Australia. And all of her consonants were, like, very, very, like, flat, very neutral. She was going for this very specific vibe. And I told her, I was like, actually, okay, I do want to keep my accent. Because this is part of my identity. And this is part of who I am. And I've gotten almost as much for this, depending on where I've lived, as I have for being queer back home. And I want this to mark me, right? Like, I want this to tell people who I am, which is part of why I type with it, especially when I'm tipsy. And Boston is kind of where that process unfolded in my mind, because you do get, some expectations. You do get people kind of underestimating you based on the voice, based on the demeanor, based on the things you don't know, even, if you sort of, blew all of your grad school tests out of the water and you're like, your wife is there to attend this prestigious university, like, it doesn't matter. And like, that is obviously not the worst kind of discrimination that people face, or even that I faced, but it did make... It did give me an inroad to seeing what Rodeo Rosie could have been, right? Because it is hard to go from having like all the space in the world to like go camp or to go do whatever, to like being able to hear your neighbors like fight or make out or whatever through like an apartment wall. Like, it's hard when the air stops smelling like the river that you're used to, right? Like, it's hard to look up at the night sky and not be able to see the stars. And like, obviously Rodeo Rosie should not be that forlorn about it, right? But you can have a version of that conversation, because one of the things I always loved about Sesame Street is that like, they do present kids with characters who are going through difficult changes, and they talk about those changes and how to deal with them. And as a kid who moved around like every 3 years, every 5 years, like, that would have been useful to me. And so like, there was a story that they could have told there. And instead it felt like they couldn't find that way in or any other way in. And so we just sort of get like this weird, like, wannabe sheriff.
And here's what's so interesting to me. Like, I asked you for your opinion on cowboys, and you gave me this super, again, like you kind of recounted some of here, this super in-depth thing. But like, as far as like cowboys in media or whatever, I actually asked one of my ToughPigs pals, Anthony Strand from the Movin' Right Along podcast. I asked him, because he loves old TV and old movies, and I was like, Anthony, it kind of feels like cowboys were an older thing than Rodeo Rosie, like cowboy movies and cowboy TV shows. And I literally, Rodeo Rosie first appears in 1974, and Anthony pointed out that the closest thing to a new Western hit in the 1970s, care to guess what it was? Biggest Western show in the 1970s.
I mean, Gunsmoke was well over.
Yep, Gunsmoke ended in 1975, so technically it was still alive when Rodeo Rosie debuts, but dying. Bonanza ends in 1973. The biggest closest thing to a new Western hit in the 70s was Little House on the Prairie, which is not really a cowboy show.
Yeah, no. Like, and I was like, oh, what was John Wayne doing? And like, he died in 79, right? Like,
yeah. So Gunsmoke actually in 1974 it's the only top rated, like the highest rated Western show. And 1974 represents the year that it fell out of the top 10. It was number 15 that year. So if cowboys were popular and were something that kids loved, I don't think kids really loved them in 1974.
Yeah. Well, see, and that's hard for me to say.
Well, that's what I wanted is like, was it a bigger deal in the South?
I mean,
because I've always been a city girl, you know. I'm a Yankee.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, and it's hard for me to say because, like, my upbringing specifically, like, my grandfather did describe me once, in my childhood as a city boy, after a sort of like horse incident, where I did not fall off the horse, but someone did have to come sort of retrieve the horse and me and sort of make sure that didn't happen, right? So, you know, it's, my grandfather was a subsistence farmer, right? Like that was the thing. He was a dairy farmer and he had like, you know, a little garden patch, but that was mostly for him, right? Like that was the fun farming, and he had potatoes and watermelon and we'd get fresh corn and all that. And like, I think one of the things that I said when we were talking about this previously, that like it isn't connected, right? But like I knew where my food came from.
But yeah, it's the point is it's difficult. It's difficult, and obviously you're saying like this sort of cowboy Western life was weirdly part of your life.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
It certainly feels like it was a dying trope by this point.
Oh yeah.
Which makes it even stranger. And for those of you listening, Rodeo Rosie premieres in 1974, which is the same year that Marshall Grover's cowboy alter ego, premieres. So again, Sesame was like, we need cowboys. We got 2 cowboys this season, 1974. We got to bring in the cowboys. And 6 years before Forgetful Jones, their most famous cowboy character, would debut. And after Forgetful Jones, we get Forgetful Jones' cowgirl girlfriend Clementine, who will play a role in one of the books we're going to start to talk about soon. Sesame loved cowboys. And it's so weird. Now, none of those other cowboys were lassoing adults' necks and, you know, stringing up Luis or anything. But it's so weird that just like, we were all in on cowboys.
I mean, see, and I don't know, because like to my mind, there's like a part of it that makes sense, because it's like, oh, you know, like kids are into cowboys. Kids go through a cowboy phase, right? Like,
do they?
I was like, oh, it's like dinosaurs, you know, or like,
do they? So I want to talk about books, because I want to address the question that, or like the little debate we're having here, which is, do kids have a cowboy phase? Because if we can agree that kids have a cowboy phase, then Rodeo Rosie sticking around so long makes sense. Because here's the thing about Rodeo Rosie. I said that she basically stops appearing on the show in 1976, but Rodeo Rosie doesn't stop appearing in books until 1992. I grew up knowing who Rodeo Rosie was. I can't tell you the first time I saw a clip of Rodeo Rosie, but I knew who Rodeo Rosie was. And I specifically knew who Rodeo Rosie was because of her appearance in the Sesame Street bedtime book, specifically the story Betty Lou Lends a Hand, where we find out that Rodeo Rosie is the loudest person on Sesame Street, and she tries to yell at a letter to get it to move.
I reckon that makes sense to me, partner.
And I knew, thank you, and I knew Rodeo Rosie was the loudest person on Sesame Street. Could not tell you what she sounded like, but I was like, this is the thing about Rodeo Rosie. She's loud. I know that she stuck around for this long. And specifically, I actually want to jump ahead to one of her last appearances, because you were saying everybody goes through a cowboy phase, and I want to talk about her biggest appearance in a book, which happens in 1992's I Want to Be a Cowboy, where Rodeo, Rosie, Marshall Grover, and Clementine, and Marshall Grover is treated as like a separate character from Grover in this altogether, which was weird.
I wasn't sure how that worked or if that was normal.
That's not normal. It's not normal, but he's treated as a completely separate character. Normally it's just like Grover just sort of has different jobs, and like one of those jobs is cowboy. Normally is how it's portrayed. Here it's like he introduced...
His job is beach.
You know, in a way, Grover is more like Barbie, because he can do anything. We see this thing, and this was part of a series of books that were basically built around basically all of the jobs you could imagine a little kid would want. There was, I want to be a ballet dancer. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a firefighter. I want to be president. I want to be a veterinarian. And then there's also, I want to be a cowboy. And what's also interesting is all of these books have a different central character. Betty Lou wants to be president. Grover wants to be a firefighter. Prairie Dawn wants to be a ballet dancer. Bert wants to be a teacher, right? The one about Elmo, the most popular character, is I want to be a cowboy. So this really seems to be telling me that people wanted to be cowboys and kids wanted to be cowboys, but I have no experience with this. This is so alien to me. And maybe it's because I'm a New Yorker. Maybe it's because I didn't like cowboys because they felt too masculine to me. And I think it is important that it's Clementine and Rodeo Rosie who do most of the teaching in this. It's like, girls can be cowboys too. But do people want to be cowboys? Rachel, help me out. Do people want that?
I mean, I like so it's like you, right? Like I think the closest I maybe ever wanted to be a cowboy was like maybe Annie Oakley, right? Or like Lucille Ball in like one of her old like Western comedies.
Which feels like that's what Rodeo Rosie is kind of going for, right?
Well,
like a real Annie Oakley
like
vibe.
Lucille Ball was funny though, so I
Fair.
I think what I wanted to be was like Helen Reddy's lighthouse keeper in Pete's Dragon, which I think was kind of like the similar like time period, but like a completely different vibe.
I wanted to be a zookeeper. I never ended my animal phase.
Well, then it's a good thing you have a Muppet podcast.
Now that my kind of woman!
I got 2 podcasts, and that's basically like a zoo. But
yeah.
Anyway, the point is, you were saying about you wanted to be Helen Reddy.
Yes.
I love her cover of Blue from the Raggedy Ann musical. Have you listened to that?
I have not, but I will seek it out.
It's real good. She did perform it on the Muppet Show as well.
Did she? Okay,
yeah.
Then I might have that episode laying around somewhere.
And it's worth noting that written by Joe Raposo, because Joe Raposo did the music to the Raggedy Ann musical and also did the music to Sesame Street. But anyway, Continue.
I sent you my cover of Sing, right?
You're gonna have to send it again. I don't know if I listened to it.
Oh,
I may have been at work at the time.
Hateful.
I may have been at work at the time, and then I forgot by the time I got home from work.
Fair. It was like done up in sort of like a Maria Takeuchi like city pop style. And
I will post a link to it in the show notes if you send it to all of us.
Shucks. Okay, I can do that. But yeah, no. So
listen,
I don't know.
Don't worry if it's not good enough for anyone else to hear.
Thank you. I will just sing.
Okay, continue. So did you want to be a cowboy?
No, I didn't want to be a cowboy, but I did feel sort of like removed from my peer group for that and several other reasons, right? And I think when I was little and people would ask me, like kindergarten, they were like, oh, what do you want to be? Like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I was like, I want to have every job in the world. And
you wanted to be Barbie.
Oh my gosh, I did want to be Barbie. But like, I kind of did, right? Like, and at the time, I think the only jobs I was aware of was that like you could have a store or like be a firefighter or like pastor a church, because that was like what my father did. And I was like, I can do all that, bring it on. And my career has actually almost been that weird. But no, like cowboy wasn't really on the radar in any way. And I think like a lot of what I remember really as far as like cowboy media that I treasured was the like Roy Rogers, Dale Evans episode of The Muppet Show.
Ooh, that's a good one.
It is a good one. And I think those actors like meant more to previous generations of my family than they meant to me, right? But like that was one that was fun to watch with Granny. Was Roy Rogers doing his thing.
I guess I'm sort of underestimating the importance of how much of the things that we watched were things that our parents and grandparents liked. Because I guess that could be a lot of people's exposure to cowboy stuff, especially once the VHS era started and stuff.
Yeah,
Because again, like, I don't know. The thing about Rodeo Rosie, to take it back to our friend Rodeo Rosie, is
Sure.
Rodeo Rosie's first book appearance is the Sesame Street Block Party, which is a coloring book. And she had already stopped appearing on the show Sesame Street by the time she appeared in a book.
Okay.
And
I had these books. I didn't have dates. I didn't have context. So this is interesting to me.
Yeah. So that's why I want to address some of this, because I sent you a bunch of scans from the books, from different books. Her biggest appearance, like we said, was in this 1992 book where she teaches Elmo how to be a cowboy. We do get to see her on a cool motorcycle at that point, and I feel like now I want to be Rodeo Rosie when I see that panel, and I think that's just because I'm a lesbian. But
I was about to say, I think really what you want to be is like Corky from Bound, but like with a leather vest.
I still haven't seen Bound, and that's something else we have to fix. So anyway.
Wow. So, okay, well, we'll do a double feater. We'll
Emmett
watch
Otter's
Bound,
Jug Band Christmas.
Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas, yeah.
And Bound. But other than that, so the biggest role that she has is in the book Tales of Sesame Gulch. And this is a fascinating book. It's from 1977, and it is a bunch of short Sesame Street stories that take place in the town of Sesame Gulch, which is ostensibly, no lie, an AU of Sesame Street.
I noticed that, like, Mr. Hooper had a saloon.
Yes!
And I was a little floored to see one of the human characters in a book.
It is weird, right? It is weird. And in another section, that's not usually done, and in another section, like, Luis is, like, working at, like, a horseshoe, like, shoeing horses.
Okay.
Which, again, is weird. But, like, yeah, it's literally like an AU where, like, Prairie Dawn is a Pony Express driver and Harry Monster is a stagecoach thief, and Bert is the sheriff. Like, it's this weird book. And I can't recommend reading it enough if you're a Sesame Street fan.
So, Bert is type A enough to be a sheriff, but is he butch enough?
No.
Okay. Well, clears that up.
But in this book, listen, I didn't become one of the internet's leading Sesame Street experts. And like a queer community advocate to not be able to confidently say that Bert is not butch enough to be a sheriff.
Well, I mean, I knew I was asking the right person. That's why I asked.
So this is really interesting for a number of reasons, but the most interesting thing is this is the book where we get the most information about Rodeo Rosie. Now, I guess the question is this true of Rodeo Rosie in general or just Rodeo Rosie in the AU?
Right. So...
But Ernie and Bert sing a campfire song called The Ballad of Rodeo Rosie, where they recount all of the great things Rodeo Rosie does and is. And, you know, Rodeo Rosie, what can we even say about Rodeo Rosie? Well,
you can say that she's really a star.
She's really a star.
She's really a rose. Sorry.
She's really a rose. She's a rodeo star. And, you know, an important thing that I know about Rodeo Rosie is that she's nice to her mother, and her father, and her sister, and her brother. And we also see in this ballad that Rodeo Rosie wins prizes in the rodeo, which we can assume. And also it seems that Rodeo Rosie is again in this ballad of Rodeo Rosie obsessed with lassoing bad guys and bringing them to justice.
Which she does a little more successfully here. And also, so they say she's quick on the draw, which I know can be, like, metaphoric. It theoretically could refer to her lariat, but typically it means, you know, she's a quick shot. So I have to know, like, has Rodeo Rosie, like, ever killed a man?
You know, Bert doesn't sing about that.
That's true.
You know, even in this sort of like alternate timeline of Rodeo Rosie,
sure,
there isn't much else to say about Rodeo Rosie besides that she lassos bad guys. And yes, she does it successfully here.
Yes.
And I guess maybe the quick on the draw thing also feels like an Annie Oakley thing that maybe they were going for.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it was really interesting to me. That this is like a song for Rodeo Rosie, but isn't ever performed. It's pretty interesting. Because Rodeo Rosie basically has no song other than that moment in the Thanksgiving parade we talked about.
Yeah.
Any other book appearances you thought were interesting? Because I feel like those are the big ones I wanted to mention.
Yeah, I mean, it's
interesting is a big word because,
well, yeah, and like it's a very strong word to use about this character, right?
Because that's the whole thing. Is it feels like there gets to a point where her thing is just showing up, riding a horse, and saying that she's Rodeo Rosie.
Yeah.
Or throwing a lasso and saying that she's Rodeo Rosie. And this is particularly confusing because I do want to briefly mention, in 1974, the same year, a Sesame Street storybook, the Sesame Street ABC storybook, introduced a character named Lasso Louise, who would show up in the Sesame Street dictionary alongside Rodeo Rosie. Like, they're both in that book, and they both love lassoing things, and
I ship it.
There isn't really much to say here. There really isn't. I guess there's some fun stuff in the Sesame Street dictionary of her and Bad Bart. Like, but fun is maybe a strong word here as well.
So I think the most notable appearance in the books for me, that I sort of called out to you, was in the background of something else. It actually took me a minute to figure out why you even sent me those pages. And then I looked at the background. And
it's the book Fun with Sign Language, which has Linda Bove demonstrating sign language, different sign language ASL words. And then it's like, how many things in this picture can you sign? And in the background of this one illustration of Sesame Street, tell me what Rodeo Rosie is up to.
Rodeo Rosie is at the dentist getting her horrific teeth cleaned.
Because that's one thing that we can use Rodeo Rosie for. She can do lasso stuff, she can ride a horse, and she's also the only Muppet with teeth. So
I mean,
there's another one, the I Can Do It By Myself book, where one of the things that she can do by herself is she can brush her teeth.
yeah.
And she's the Muppet demonstrating that.
It's so upsetting. And like I get that maybe Bert couldn't go to the dentist because he has no teeth, but like those teeth are so upsetting, Becca.
They're really upsetting. Let's remember that the teeth are really upsetting.
Like, no, but it's horrific. Like, put Sweetums in the dentist chair, leave the everything Muppets out of it. Like, those teeth are so upsetting. I don't know.
I do want to say, obviously, mostly performed by Jerry Nelson. I did not send this, but there were a couple of like books on tape where she's performed by Fran Brill, doing a much more natural voice because Fran is a cisgender woman. Fran has a much more natural sort of women's voice, doing a more subtle Southern accent. I'll post a clip here, and folks at home are listening to Rodeo Rosie from the Great Sesame Street Pet Show right now.
Lance can gallop so fast, I know he's gonna win the prize at the show.
Wow, that was great. But other than that, I don't know what they were trying to do with Rodeo Rosie and why Rodeo Rosie stuck around this long. I truly don't have the answer to any of these questions.
Yeah, and I think you started all of this with me by saying, like, I want you to tell me if Rodeo Rosie is good and if we like her. And
do we like her?
So I want to like her. Like I said, I feel sort of a kinship with her, like, with her Southern ways and her country drawl and her, like, kind of fish out of water vibe, right? Like, I am living in Europe right now, and I just kind of wake up every day and I'm like, what happened? I am from a farm, like, I'm not really from, but like,
I wasn't going to correct you.
Well, but like, there is something there that I relate to, and I want to like Rodeo Rosie, and like, obviously you don't have to dig into all the big complicated stuff, but it feels like a really obvious thing that kids go through, and you could talk to them with this character, and they just don't. And I guess for me, it's really interesting because you can clearly see them trying to figure out what to do with this character, like you said, and then they don't do much with her at all, and then they don't do anything with her. And like, from my perspective, the thing to do with her is extremely obvious.
Yeah.
Like, she's a transplant. And like, that makes sense. So like, I don't like Rodeo Rosie, but I like the potential that she has.
Rachel, I feel like what you're highlighting here is kind of the essence of so many fandoms that I'm a part of. Because, to say something that I've said on my other podcast, Here Comes Tomorrow, with our mutual friend, Rachel Josephine Reisman, the best version of the X-Men is the version in your head.
Yeah.
The best version of the X-Men is not a version of the X-Men on TV or in a comic you've read. It's the version that you kind of make up as you read. And in a way, especially when dealing with these kind of forgotten, underwritten Muppets, in a way, the best version of them is always going to be the version in your head as well. Yeah. And I know that's how I feel about Betty Lou, and folks at home know that I've talked a little bit about that, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that next week. But it's so interesting to do this kind of, wish casting and thinking about it in this regard, because I feel like we're never really going to be satisfied with these kind of failed, dead Muppets. And you see the potential. And one of the pieces of potential that I would do with Rodeo Rosie is I would remove her teeth.
Well, I would make sure that the teeth are not there. I think when you say remove them, that sounds a little troubling.
An episode where Rodeo Rosie learns about what happens.
I mean,
I don't even know how to finish this joke.
I don't think you should. No, but
Rodeo Rosie is really a rose, Rachel.
You've hustled your last wrestler, Rosie. Now it's time for you to lose your bicuspids.
Exactly. Kids need to learn that.
You shouldn't have crossed Bad Bart. Yeah, no, I don't. I don't know. No, yeah, like there are things there. There's potential there, and like that potential doesn't always get realized. And I think it's less though. Like it reminds me of like almost I think I just said nothing but filler words for like a solid 60 seconds.
You sure did. Darn tootin'.
No,
You'll hear that? That was some filler words down there. I can't do it as well as Rachel.
It kind of started at a certain point in the books, especially when she was in the background getting her teeth cleaned, reminded me of when a C-lister from like a comic book universe would show up in like later, more serious media, right? Like Rodeo Rosie getting her teeth cleaned reminded me of the Wonder Twins showing up in like a 2000s Justice League series and getting killed off horribly. You know, she's getting her teeth cleaned because they want you to know that they understand that those teeth are upsetting. So they're going to draw attention to it. And, you know, that's what you get for noticing. At least that might not have been the intent, but that was definitely how it felt to me.
Rachel, it's been such a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you, friend.
Rachel, where can people find you online if you wish to be found?
Right. Well, at the moment...
If you don't have a place where you wish to be found, that's fine too.
Fair. So my business website is still kind of a going concern, and my last domain was under my last name, but you can find me on Blue Sky as MomFriend64, and I can give you the handle to put in there and wherever else. But yeah, if you need writing for your website, or if you need music for your video game, or even your podcast.
Rachel, that sounds impossible. You've never done music for a podcast before.
I have certainly never done music for an X-Men podcast starring two of my best trans friends focused on the Grant Morrison run of X-Men.
Yeah, Rachel does the theme song to my other podcast.
I do. It's true.
And I should say for folks listening at home, Rachel's Blue Sky is amazing. Rachel's Blue Sky is maybe not always clean.
Yes, that's fair.
But, you know, we're all grown-ups here, like Rodeo Rosie.
Exactly. You know, and I think if when I'm not clean, I'm at least clever enough to make up for it.
Oh, I love your stuff. Speaking of, Rachel, you're a musician and a songwriter, as we mentioned, you know, earlier, as you just said. And, you know, I was thinking about how there's never really been a song for Rodeo Rosie, except the Ballad of Rodeo Rosie, which was just words. So I was really hoping, before you go, would you be able to perform the Ballad of Rodeo, Rosie, for everybody at home?
Becca, nothing would make me happier than performing the Ballad of Rodeo, Rosie for, to our knowledge, the first time with actual music against the lyrics.
All right, folks, the world premiere of the Ballad of Rodeo, Rosie.
Rodeo Rosie, as everyone knows, is really a rose. Rodeo Rosie will really go far, because Rodeo Rosie's a rodeo star. Rodeo Rosie is nice to her mother, her father, her sister, and also her brother. And when busting a bronco down at the corral, Rodeo Rosie says, "Sorry, old pal." Rodeo Rosie is quick on the draw, but she's always on the right side of the law. Why, the time that she captured old mean Guy McPhail, she took him to jail. Rodeo Rosie is strong for her size. At rodeos, our Rosie wins every prize. Her gold cups and blue ribbons would fill 20 banks. But each time she wins, Rosie always says thanks. Rodeo Rosie's the pride of the West. Rodeo Rosie is really the best. And Rodeo Rosie, as everyone knows, is really a rose.
And that was the world premiere of the Ballad of Rodeo Rosie, right here on A Prairie Dawn Companion. Music and vocals by Rachel Garrett Steele, featuring additional instrumentation by Bobson Dugnut Jr., with the original lyrics from Tales of Sesame Gulch by Ruth Anna Long. Thanks, Rachel. Do you have anything you want to add?
Becca, they're hauling me away.
I think Rachel just got pulled off of the stage by a giant lasso. So next time on A Prairie Dawn Companion, it's the season finale of this little podcast. We're checking in on Prairie and Betty once more as we wrap up the 1970s and preview what's coming next in season 2.
Oh, I see a bird flying in the sunset.
How about you kids at home? What do you see?
And hey, if you're enjoying this show, please remember to rate and review it on Spotify or on your podcatcher of choice. Post to the internet about it. Tell a friend. Tell your horse. Tell...
Becca, help!
Okay, I gotta go. For A Prairie Dawn Companion, this is Becca Petunia. Happy trails.
I really am quite remarkable.
A Prairie Dawn Companion is a production of ToughPigs.com. It is written, produced, edited, and hosted by Becca Petunia, and executive produced by the ToughPigs Muppet Fan Podcast executive producer, Joe Hennes. Thanks to Scott Hanson, Shane Keating, Tony Whitaker, and the whole Muppet Wiki team for helping me with research. The book Street Gang by Michael Davis was also indispensable. Thanks to Katilyn Miller, Michal Richardson, and Eli Lee for help with script revisions. Follow ToughPigs on social media. You can support us on Patreon or by buying a t-shirt on our TeePublic. Join the conversation on the ToughPigs Discord. You can support A Prairie Dawn Companion and lots of other podcasts too by giving Muppet Fan Podcasts with ToughPigs.com 5 stars on your podcast reviewing app of choice.
Did you enjoy that, Grover?
Oh, that was terrific.
Sure was.
And you know what?
What?
Next time, I will do the imagining, and I will take you on a special, exciting ride on Sesame Street.
Oh, that's great, Grover.
On my tricycle.